Jessica, welcome. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you for giving your time and working remotely to make this happen. This is new for Ellie, doing the remote thing. So thanks for your patience while we figure it all out.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, thank you.
First thing we like to ask in these interviews is tell us a little bit about what it was like your senior year of high school and you're imagining your future. And what was your vision back then for your career and your life?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Um, I come from a long line of entrepreneurs and business owners, except for my dad. So my kind of backstory was my grandfather had a chain of pharmacies, like the old school pharmacies that had like the soda pop bars and things like that.
Yeah.
And he didn't exit those businesses successfully, and they had to shut down when like change like Eckert's and CVS came to the game. So that put my dad in a much different financial position than my previous family generations were. And so I was raised from a very young age to say, like, go get a good corporate job, very stable career, make sure they have a good 401k, good benefits, good, all kinds of good growth plans, things like that, and stay there, right?
Mm,
Just stay there.
mm.
So you layer that on with I was I was an athlete. So I grew up riding horses. I played field hockey and lacrosse in high school and was going to college to play field hockey as well. So I was very into sports. So my dream was to get a good corporate career in the sports industry. I wanted to work for the Philadelphia Eagles. I grew up outside of Philadelphia in southern New Jersey. So that was like my dream. And I was going to go to school and get my business degree and work in the NFL. And that's kind of how I set up. Good corporate job, stable company, the NFL, they're still around, I think, right? So that was what I was focused on when I was graduating high school.
And then, so what did you do? What was that first step out of your education
Yeah.
into corporate? Did you successfully land that job?
Yeah, so I went to college. My first internship my freshman year was with Pop Warner football. Got really well connected in the Pop Warner world, who was connected to the NFL. Started working for the Eagles as an intern. I think it's late sophomore year, early junior year. And I didn't end up staying with the Eagles, but I got offered a full-time gig with the NHL team, the Philadelphia Flyers, my senior year. So I actually started working my last semester of senior year. I was working full time for the Flyers and finishing up school. And I stayed with them until about 2007 when my husband re entered my life. But I accomplished that dream. I did find that, sometimes working in your passions and your personal life is not always the best career choice, right? It kind of pulls back the curtain. There are
Right.
great organizations and I had
Mm.
great mentors in there, but it wasn't what my expectations were, right? It was very hard work, and NHL, God, I should remember this, but I think it's 84 games a year. So on top of working your normal schedule, you're at 42 home games on top of that. So
That's
long
incredible.
hours, but worth it. I learned a lot.
I think that a lot of athletes think that they want to work in sports because they loved playing. And then
Yep.
you don't really realize that the trainers and the staff and everybody is working when you're not. So they're there when you're playing and they're there when you're not there. And it's just a
Yeah.
ton of work, professional sports.
It was very fun. And I do have to say, my parents loved it. I mean, my dad was a huge Eagles fan. My mom still is a huge Flyers fan. I remember how the Flyers ran their organization. We do these charity events, and we got paired with one of the alumni. So we would escort the alumni to all these charity events. And so I was paired with the nicest gentleman, one of my favorite people I've ever met. It was Bernie Perrant. And he was one of the original Broad Street Bullies, and my mom loved him. And so, like, for that stint that I was working with the Eagles and Flyers, like, I was the golden child. Like, my two other sisters did not hold a candle to anything. My parents were
What
super happy
sisters?
with
What
me.
sisters? What sisters? We don't even know them.
I know, right? And then when I chose to leave, my parents were like, I mean, you're making the worst decision of your life. So that's a whole other story. But
Was
I've
there?
heard that a couple times.
Yeah. Was there a moment that your dad's messaging about find something stable, find something corporate, because of the experience he went through? Was there a moment you were like, oh, now I understand why he gave me that advice and why maybe it isn't good advice for me, but it was what he offered me? Was there a moment you understood that?
It's kind of funny because my dad and I really haven't had conversations about that kind of messaging and his background in it and what he went through as a kid, being the son of a very hardworking entrepreneur, really until the last 5 years. He's opened up about it. But I think the moment for me that I was like, wait, this doesn't work, right? And he couldn't have foresaw this, but so I left sports, and I had mentioned I reconnected with my husband. We went to high school together. We reconnected. He was living in Aspen, Colorado at the time. And so it's like working in Philly, and I was like, Philly, Aspen, Philly at work. I'm going to Aspen, right?
Mhm.
So I get this opportunity to go to Aspen, work for the same company he was working for, very large corporate real estate developer, based in Colorado. And that was 2008. So I moved out there for that job in the spring of 2008. The project we were working on was funded by Lehman Brothers, partially, right? Lehman Brothers,
Mm.
and then the other half of the funding was from this bank that happened to get nationalized by Germany, and the funding got taken away in September of 2008, 2 weeks after the Lehman Brothers
Ooh.
crash. So this whole messaging of you work for, and this is, this is one of the biggest, still to this day, one of the biggest real estate developers in the country, right? So work for a big company, secure benefits. I had a great salary, great benefits, everything. But when that happened and that project lost most of its funding, like I realized I'm just a dame on a spreadsheet, right? And there's some guy back in New York that's sitting there and he's got to cut budgets and he's just going through a spreadsheet. He doesn't know me. There's no malicious intent, but he's just cutting names off a list. So that was the moment for me where I was like, there's really not security. Like that's a fallacy, right? It doesn't matter
Fantasy.
what
Yeah.
career
It's
you're
a
in
fantasy.
or entrepreneur, corporate employee, there is no security. So,
Mhm. I think that we all, as entrepreneurs, kind of have that moment. It doesn't mean that you necessarily got laid off, but that light bulb moment that says, this idea of security isn't real. And I would rather be in charge of my own destiny and be in charge of my own vision for what I build in life. And there's a little more control feeling in owning that than there is being just a name or a number on a spreadsheet. There's always just that chance that you could be in a mass layoff or even in a medium or small size company, that if you're not the one making the choices and the decisions, that there is that risk there. And I would rather my risk be in a little bit more my control. So I understand that deeply.
Yeah. Well, and we need it. We need workers and we need business owners. We need
We need
both.
both. Yeah.
But it's, when you
yeah, we do
recognize
both.
that moment where you're like, I'd rather deal with the stress of owning a business than the stress of working for someone who owns a business. Different stress. So you ended up, tell us a little bit about how you ended up owning your first company.
So we're in Aspen. I think I got laid off first and Al still had some income. He was still working. And we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. In the meantime, we had friends that owned like this little boutique wine store, that we started frequenting more and more often the less and less we worked. We're like, this is super cute and this is fun. You drink wine all day and you sell wine. Like, that's great. So that's about as much thought that went into that business. And we asked our friends that were running that store if they'd help us start up a similar store in a different market if we wouldn't compete with them. And they're like, yeah, of course. So we do that. That'd be fun. Where are you guys going to go? And my in-laws had a house in Southwest Florida they weren't using at the time. So we're like, we'll go to Southwest Florida. We've got a place to live. We can use all of the money that we've saved to open the business, not have to worry about living expenses. So really within probably 4 or 5 months, they had helped us build the business model. We relocated down to Southwest Florida, found a space, and started building out the store like by hand, by ourselves.
I
In a
love
whole new
that.
community. I mean, to go to a whole new community, that was a new community for you in Southwest Florida.
New community. Yeah, we had the community like from my in-laws. We had their community because they had been there part-time since 2004. So we knew some people around there. But we didn't know the industry, brand new industry for us. I mean, we joke all the time, like before I got into the wine industry, like I would drink, the $5 bottles off of Total Wine shelves. And we went into the luxury space. So we went the opposite end. Like our average bottle of wine was $500. So like
Oh, wow.
was a little in over my head, but that was the niche we picked, and brand new community too, geographically. But both the wine community and the community of Naples really embraced us. It was still the depth of the recession, right? And starting a business, and you've heard stories like this, like FedEx, I think, was started during a depression or a recession, Disney, right? There's so much opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
start in that position. And there was a really big, wide open market because a lot of our would be competitors had either failed or were struggling at that
Mm-hmm.
time. So we were filling a gap in the market.
I would love to know kind of what you did before or what you and your partner did that made you think, like, I can do this. It seems like that's a part of your personality and DNA. You just have this, like, this is what I'm going to do, and I did it. But what made you think, like, hey, we can totally switch industries, move across the country, and get this done? Like, were you doing some business background, or was like everything, including the industry, brand new?
So we had the business background, right? And I think we felt confident in our business skill sets. Like my skill set was sales and marketing, right? Primarily marketing. That's where I spent my career. I was like, okay, I can do marketing. I can get us up and running. I can generate brand awareness. My husband, he came from a family business in the fish industry, and so he was really familiar with product buying and how to buy product and how to price it and things like that. And his background was finance as well. So like, he felt very comfortable in that space. So we felt comfortable with like our business skills,
And they were
right?
complementary, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. So we really much were. Now, look, there's still days, right, where I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, do I even know how to do what I'm doing? And there was a lot of that starting it. But I do think one thing is about my personality is I am able to overcome that and just do it and just try, right? At least give myself a shot. And I think my husband was so gung ho at that point because he came from a business background. He's like, this is what I want to do. I want to own businesses. This is my life's goal. This is where we're going as a couple. Right. So we're going to try this. And if it fails, I mean, luckily we're 24 at the time. We didn't have a mortgage. We didn't have kids. Like like if we fail, oh, well, we just start over. We're 24. Right. And so, yeah, I do think my personality is a little bit like that, but that doesn't mean that there isn't doubt, that happens almost daily still, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good thing to emphasize because particularly like I know you, Jessica, and I know how competent and confident and centered you always feel to me. Like you always just seem like, well, she's one of the smartest people in the room for sure, if not the smartest. And that I think sometimes people don't realize there's still, even if you have that image or you feel that centeredness, there are still doubts and you can trust yourself to figure it out. You don't have to be the world's greatest wine expert to have a successful wine business. And I think that's a
Mhm.
secret that a lot of entrepreneurs figure out. If you know how to run a business,
Mm-hmm.
then you run a business. You can run a business. And that
Mhm.
I think that was also an aha moment for me when I went from the automotive business into the sign business. So I think that's a great message for aspiring entrepreneurs is you'll figure it out, and you won't always
Yeah.
feel great. You won't always feel like you know what you're doing, but do it anyway.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
famous entrepreneur book, E-Myth, and I'm not necessarily wholly endorsing everything in it, but I think a lot of times people are like, I'm passionate about this thing or I know how to do this thing. And I think the example is like a plumber. And the plumber then starts a plumbing business, but all of a sudden they're not plumbing anymore. They're doing all the business things. And I came at this entrepreneurship thing from the opposite of being like, I don't know what I'm passionate about exactly. I'm passionate about business. I can learn whatever industry it is. And it sounds like you kind of came in a similar way. You're like, we have the buying background, we have finance and sales and marketing, it applies to the wine industry. We can see how these things would fit in the wine industry and make it figure outable.
Exactly.
So how long did you own the wine business and you exited that? Tell us about your exit.
Yeah, so we owned that business for 39 months. So I always call that kind of my early life crisis. We wanted to get back to more like professional services, service-based business, kind of what we felt comfortable with. But we enjoyed the wine business while it lasted. But the goal was never to own that business forever. The goal was never to stay in Southwest Florida forever, maybe come back when we're like 70 or 80, that kind of time frame, right? But we did not plan for that exit, even though that was the plan. We did nothing to plan for it. We were very fortunate and we were very lucky that we found someone who wanted to buy the business. So we were able to sell that business about 39 months in, like I said. We did sell it through a broker. We'll get to this part of the story, but not the current brokerage that I'm affiliated with, but we were exposed to this whole business broker and M&A for small business through that transaction. So sold that company, didn't really have a plan for after. We road tripped across the country for about 12 months and ended back up in Colorado again.
That's so cool. Do you mind telling us kind of what the multiple on EBITDA was, or just a little bit about the deal without having to give us any specific numbers? Or can you even remember?
I know we got paid more than we should have. Like I know that for a fact, right?
Now that you're in the
and
business.
Well done.
Yeah, I know the deal went faster. So we ended up selling from the time we listed the business to closing was about 45 days, which is
Good
incredibly
God.
fast. I know that
Yeah.
now. And I know the multiple was way higher than it should have been. Unfortunately, the business isn't there anymore. They closed about 5 years ago, but they did make it through a few years after. They kept all of our staff and, you know, in my grandest hopes, it would still be there, but it's not.
Well, yeah, that happens.
Yep.
It
does.
Yeah.
happens a lot. So that experience of going through the brokerage with selling your company, what did you learn from that? What was that experience like working with a broker?
It wasn't a good experience. So I give him credit because he found a buyer, right? And the buyer did close in 45 days, right? And probably overpaid for the business a little bit, right? But he didn't do much else. So he introduced us to the buyer and left it us to figure it out. So I ran the whole due diligence process with the buyer. We negotiated the deal on our own.
Oh my gosh.
We did all the closing procedures. We did the training and transition after the fact. The only other time, so he introduced me to the buyer probably 2 weeks into the listing agreement, and then I didn't see him again till the closing when he showed up to
Whoa.
pick up his 6-figure check
That is
and tried to sell me
malpractice.
life insurance at that
Ugh.
closing. And so this is one of those other
That's
like
so
aha moments that
cringy.
I know, right? So this is one of those other aha moments entrepreneurs talk about a lot. And I was like, this could be done better. Like, even if like one of my mentors in the wine business told me, if you ever find something where you can be 1% better than everybody else and absolutely crush it, like run straight into that industry. And I was like, well, here's an industry. I don't think I can be 1% better than what this is going on. Like, I think I can be at least 10% better, maybe more. So that was one of the inspirations of us getting into the brokerage industry.
Interesting. So was it literally that experience sort of launched you then? You both were thinking, this is ripe for improvement and we can really do something great with that. Some of our listeners probably don't really know exit planning and how that whole process with a broker works. So maybe give us just a quick little primer for people who don't know all these terms, EBITDA and what give them a little lesson so we kind of
Yeah.
get to the basics.
Yeah. So basically, there's 3 phases of business, I call it. You've got your startup phase, you got your growth phase when you're growing your business. And then there's this third phase called exit phase. And that's when you're preparing to leave your business, right? There should be some preparation involved with that. And that's usually what's called exit planning. It helps define, are you going to leave your business to your children? Are you going to give it to the employees? Are you going to sell it through a broker? Things like that. Once you decide what your exit plan is, that's when you enter enter, for me, it was selling the business. And you're typically, they're going to sell your business using a business broker or an investment banker. Investment bankers typically work on businesses that are valued at $50 million or more, right? Below that can be an M&A advisor or business broker.
An M&A, tell them what M&A is.
Yes, M&A stands for mergers and acquisitions. So, fancy term for saying buying and selling businesses, right? But businesses are typically priced as a multiple of your earnings. So your earnings can be defined as EBITDA, which is your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Or there's a further metric called seller's discretionary earnings, which is your EBITDA plus one working owner's salary. They're both accounting terms, right? And if your accountant can give you a little more clarity on what your EBITDA or your SDE is. But the purpose of that is to normalize how people run businesses. So like some business owners choose to fund their business through debt. Some don't, right? That's why we'll take that net income and we add back interest, right? Some business owners choose to run as an S corp. Some choose to run as a C corp, and so that's why we add back the corporate taxes and things like that. So you normalize that earnings metric so you can compare different businesses to each other. So it's apples to apples versus apples to oranges. And then that multiple I mentioned is really like, it's kind of like a function on return on investment. Like for a buyer, like how many years is it going to take me to get a return on investment? And the higher the multiple is indicative of the bigger the business. Bigger businesses get higher multiples, but also like what I call the quality of the business. Like how well is it run? Does it have a good team? Does it have a good brand? Does it have good operations in place? And those multiples range based on size, industry, and then by individual company, right? Like my wine business, like I say, like, yeah, I think we got paid a really good multiple, but it could have been because we had great branding. We had great product selection. We had ins with wineries. Like you just can't sell off the street. You have to like fly and interview with the families, like things like that. Right. And so that multiple comes up with the intangibles that are valuable in that business. So Maggie, does that help?
Yes. Thank you. That was a great little
And
lesson.
I'll do a little shameless plug that if you're wanting to learn more specifically on the terms of EBITDA and buying and selling 101, listeners can go back to season 1. And I have a few that are more like pure education episodes to jump in and dive in and learn a little bit more about those terms.
So your company, your current company, tell us about Exit Factor and what you do.
Yeah. So I really loved being in the business brokerage world and the mergers and acquisitions world. But what I found was that most business owners don't prepare for the exit like I didn't, right? And so what Exit Factor does is we work with business owners to get their business model right for exit. We increase their profitability. We make sure the business is about more than the owner. So if we go back to E-Myth, right, that the business owners are working on the business versus working in the business. And ultimately what that does is if we increase the profitability, we increase that or decrease the time the owner is spending in the business, that business owner is able to exit when and how they choose for more money. So we do that through a consulting format. We offer business assessments and then one-to-one consulting services to help business owners achieve those goals in the future.
And this is really an add-on to then your service as a broker.
Yeah, it's really the before phase. So then when a client's done with us, typically we're going to pass them on to someone who's going to what I call like execute the exit. So that could be a broker, an investment banker. If it's a family transition, usually you don't need a broker. It's more of like an attorney that's going to handle that family transition. But the business still needs to be in good shape for a family transition, right? So.
Yeah, and I think that business owners underestimate this preparation period and how big of a difference it can make to the value of your company. And so talk to us a little bit about when someone should be thinking about their exit strategy and starting to work with an exit planner.
So it's a great question. And I'm a big proponent, and you should begin with the end in mind, right? Mainly because in my brokerage experience, I've seen that 95% of people end up exiting their companies for unforeseen circumstances. if we go back to that control thing, like we think we can control this timeline and this exit plan, and the truth is we can't, right? Most people exit. Burnout's the number one reason. Health issues, family issues, relocation issues, financial stress, right? So I am a big proponent is that you should always have some type of exit plan in mind. You should have an understanding of what your company is worth today and what your exit options are this year should something happen, right? That being said, you know, if you're thinking about going down the exit path and the exit phase, you do need a minimum of 3 years for kind of the planning. So when you look at how do I really increase my value or how do I increase my options, any buyer, any banker, any lender, anyone who's going to execute the exit is going to look at the last 3 years to see, has this company been stable? Has this company been growing? And the best way to maximize that is to have this 3-year history. So minimum 3 years, but always good. Like, go into strategic planning with your team annually and have that conversation. Like, what's our exit plan this year? Should something happen to me as an owner? It's also called succession planning, right? And I find in my work, a lot of business owners don't have that in place. And the truth is, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow for any of us, right? Good or bad doesn't have to be like the 3 Ds, doesn't have to be death, but like maybe we just hit burnout. Maybe we get a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? Do we want to really pass something like that up because we don't have a plan for the succession of our business?
As a business owner, it stresses me out to think about talking to my employees about succession planning.
Mhm.
How
I
do
can
you
see that,
how
yeah.
do you do it? I mean, how do you it's interesting to me.
Like, we're not going to talk about, hey, this is my goal is to sell the company and I'm actively trying to sell it, right? It's more a conversation of let's talk about succession. Let's talk about a plan if something happens to us or if something comes up in our lives where we need to take a step back. What is the plan for that? Very similar to like you go through on the personal side, estate planning, right? And we're just talking about I have a young 3-year-old, right? So we have to go through the whole like, what if this happens? What if this happens? Who takes care of bricks? Who gets the house? Who runs the businesses? It's a very similar conversation of just, what is our backup plan if something happens, if I get hit by a bus, if I get some type of crazy opportunity that I get to travel through Europe and speak, like who's going to run things, right?
And I think that's why you should be building out that team and leadership team with the end in mind from the beginning so that you have this team that is coming around you, that if you aren't there one day, the wheels don't come off the ship. That's a bad, those two things don't match, but and I think that Maggie, it was talking right before we started recording, just how she has gotten to this point in her business where she is got this amazing leadership team. Why don't you just give a couple comments on, I'm still in that, what I would call just past startup and into that growth phase where we're starting to put those systems, teams, and operations in place. But you've been doing this for a while now. So, and you're kind of at that point. And I think that's really admirable. So can you just kind of
Thanks.
talk just quickly about what your leadership team looks like and how that's gotten to this moment?
So yeah, my husband and I are he's CFO and I'm CEO, and we run EOS. I'm sure you're familiar with the Entrepreneur's Operating System. And so we have a 5-person leadership team that runs the company more or less, and we're just there I'm leadership coaching them more than anything else, taking on small projects that I want to take on. But it's been fun to step back and watch them make mistakes and have success and give me surprises. They bring up ideas that I hadn't thought of, or, they feel strongly in a way I don't. Recently, we've added some team members, and which means obviously we've raised our sales goal, because if you add team members, you got to sell more. And they're at a point where they're like, oh, this is sobering. Now we have to get more done. And so it's fun to watch that. So that's really what it's been like for me, is the thrill of watching them grow and learn. And you really bring up something for me to think about is, we're not in a exit planning mode right now at our age and stage, especially because the business is really running so smoothly. So I love the idea of, figuring out how to have that conversation with them, that every year we're going to talk about succession planning if something happened. what do you guys think should happen? What would you like to see happen? That would be a really rich conversation to have with them.
Especially with like our
Yeah.
leadership teams. It's not like you have to talk to all your employees. So tell us a little bit more about, okay, so you went from kind of this dream of working in sports into moving and being in a corporate environment to true small business ownership, start from startup phase to exit. And then you transitioned into M&A brokerage and really identified this exit strategy gap. Where are you now? What is your vision for the future and your business as you've now been building a business about exiting businesses?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love it. So there's this stat that really inspires me every day to wake up. So 87% of businesses in America close their doors.
Mm.
So, of all the businesses that start, only 13% have a successful exit. That means that the business owner is paid something for all their hard work, time, money, effort. And that number is incredibly low, right? And it's when I look at it, it's not just about the business owner, although that is a huge impact on the business owner. Like I think a lot of people look at the celebrity business owners and they think every business owner is rich, right? And that is not the case, right? So it's a huge impact for that business owner who their entire retirement might be the sale of the business or they have nothing else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even if we look beyond that, if we look at for every business that closes, there's employees that lose their jobs. There's then families that are impacted by that, right? There's customers and vendors that have to go find new solutions for their services. And ultimately what ends up happening, and I think what's we've seen happen in the US specifically, as we lose more small businesses every year, big corporate gets that business. It's not like a new small business pops up and fills that need. The customers will flock to Targets and Amazons and the Home Depots of the world. And that takes impact out of the local communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm sitting in, my small town of South Lake, Texas, and we lose a retail store, and instead of shopping now at the retail store, I'm going to Amazon, my tax dollars are not going back to support Tarrant County. My tax dollars are now going back to big corporate Amazon headquarters in Seattle, right? And so that's what my big vision is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to solve. I realize that I can't do that on my own. It's a tall order. So we get to kind of almost like a full circle of the story and how Maggie and I know each other is I made a decision about 2 years ago to sell part of Exit Factor to a franchise company called United Franchise Group. And one of my mentors, Ray Titus, Ray came to me about 2.5 years ago and he's like, I think you really have something here. How you accomplish your mission is through franchising. You can't do this on your own. You need other people to help support you and grow the brand through a franchise concept. So we franchised last year. We just finished up our first full year of franchising, and we've got about 68 locations across 15 states right now.
That's crazy.
So the next
That's
few years
crazy.
is continuing to grow that brand. We're also looking at international growth next year and targeting opening in potentially UK, Ireland, looking at international markets too, because this is not just a US problem. This is a global problem.
Are there communities that in America that do a good job of helping preserve small business through brokerage? Like, are there communities where the penetration is really good on brokerage? Because I know in our community, most people don't even know there's a business broker. They don't know they exist.
We have very few here.
Yeah.
We're like very undersaturated in the brokerage world.
Yeah. Do you know there are communities out there that you would say, actually, they do a lot of brokerage business?
Yeah. I mean, the state of Florida does a lot of brokerage business by far. It's like the biggest state. And then obviously, then you look at the big states like California, Texas, New York, they have the most transactions. And I think the brokerage industry really has gotten an awareness lift over the last 5 to 10 years. But what I still think is missing is most business owners show up to a broker when they're done. I'm already burnt out. I'm done. I need to retire. Here's my business. Go sell it. And inherently, they don't understand what goes into the entire process. And that's where we come back to there's issues in the business. It's not profitable enough. It's too dependent on the owner. There's a host of other two. We've identified like 62 different issues that could exist basically to prevent a sale. And so what ends up happening is even if a broker gets that listing, on average, only 20% of those listings will sell. 80% of them will go out of business. So brokerage industry has made an impact, but there's more work like we need to take accountability for as business owners. We can't just say, I'm going to run my business, show up to a broker one day and let them figure it out. Like there's awareness, education, and preparation we need to do as owners ahead of time.
I think as business owners and service providers as a whole, because I think a lot of times we get to the accountant at the end of the year and it's all about like tax mitigation. And if you're looking at selling your business in the next few years, you don't need to actually be mitigating your taxes. You need to be thinking about preparation for sale, and you want to be profitable for that. And
Paying taxes.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that you said is something I'm really passionate about. So I just want to take a moment to like give it its weight, which is over the past 30, 50 years, we have seen a transition away from small business ownership as they close their doors into, corporate. And we're losing economic diversity in our small community or in our communities. We're losing small businesses in our communities, and it doesn't help our overall economy. It doesn't help our local economies. It doesn't help our economy as a whole. Having more people step up to the small business ownership plate, having more small business owners who are ready to exit those businesses and then be good, solid, strong businesses to move forward is incredibly important. And so it sounds like you have some of that mission in what you're doing. And I think that's really unique. And so I just wanted to, one, commend you, and two, let you talk a little bit more about like the economic development side, because people hear this and they tend to think too individualized and rather than like macroeconomic wise. So do you have like thoughts or opinions on why small business ownership is so important?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. If you go to the Small Business Administration website, the SBA website, they have so much great data to give you an understanding of the impact small business has in America, right? So small business provides over half of all the jobs in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we lose small businesses, we lose jobs too. Right. So it is about the macroeconomic impact. There's like, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's a very large percentage of GDP is small business as well. Right. But if we look at how does it impact society, right? There's those jobs that go away every time a small business closes, and corporate's not filling a 1-to-1 job ratio. Right. And I think what we see going on right now in the business world and with the advent of AI and automation and things like that, will AI take away all the jobs? No. Will they take away some of the jobs? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And who has the resources to invest in technology that's going to quicken the pace of those jobs going away is corporate. Right. So small business is really going to provide that gap or those jobs or that security for people. And so if we just look at that and forget about diving into the economic impact in your local communities and tax dollars and supporting other merchants and other families, there's a whole ripple effect, right? But just baseline, we need jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about, you've had such a diverse experience in business. I'm just fascinated by it. You've been in the corporate world. You've run a small business. You've been you're a franchisee of Transworld, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You're in United Franchise. I'm a Sinorama, which is part of United Franchise Group, and you're Transworld broker. And then you decided to launch your own franchise with Exit Factor. So now you're part of the products of another franchise. So you are both a franchisee and a franchisor. So tell us what that's like getting on the other side of that wall of being a franchisee and being shown something, and now you're actually teaching people how to be a franchise. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I really feel like I found my footing on this side as a franchisor. And because how I look at my role as a franchisor is inherently what I'm doing is I'm helping support and grow other business owners. And if I look back at my career, that's kind of a major theme. We've had had different steps here and there, like I call my early life crisis with wine, right? But the main theme is I've always really thrived where I support and build up other business owners and other entrepreneurs. And as a franchisor, that's what my sole job is now, right? Is yes, it's try to find franchisees that are going to support my mission of Exit Factor, which is to support business owners, right? But really, I'm supporting them and helping them build and grow their businesses. So I feel like this has really been, I don't know if I like the word calling or life purpose, right? But it's really where I feel very comfortable.
Nice. And I think that a lot of times people want to grow a business and they think about becoming a franchise. And
Mhm.
they say, "Oh, well, I want to grow my business, I'll become a franchise." And I'm like, "Well, you will grow your business, but you're just going into a whole nother role.
Yeah,
You're
it's a
not
whole
really
different
doing
business.
that business anymore. You're now
Yeah.
supporting other business owners." So you got to be careful. I've had a lot of people who want to talk to me about, I know you're in franchising. I'm thinking about creating a franchise. And I'm like, well, it's not what you're doing now. So be prepared.
No, it's coaching, really. It's,
Mm-hmm.
developing franchisees is coaching, right? And that it's very different if you're running like a cafe or a restaurant or a retail store. You may be good at that, but that's not what you have to be good at to be a successful franchisor. And Maggie, we were talking about this, but the founder of United Franchise Group and a mentor to both of us, Ray, is extremely good at this, right? But not everybody is, and it's a lot of hard work and there is a lot of responsibility too.
Yeah. I think people think like, well, I'm going to sell my franchise idea to people and they're just going to go grow my business. I'm like, well, they're going to take a little piece of you with them.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the part of being a franchisor that is coaching and being really good at the systems and the processes and the sales and the marketing really leans into what you were already good at, which is what made you maybe cut out for it. Where again, it's back to like that E-Myth idea of like, if you have a really good small business, doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be really good at the next part, which is that the systems, processes, and coaching other people how to do it. And if you haven't built a leadership team around yourself already that is able to execute upon your your ideas and work on their own because you've made those systems for them, then you're probably not ready to be a franchisor.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to have those pieces thought out. And I've been a part of a franchise. I've seen several. When I was looking for a business, I looked at a bunch, and there are many out there that are fantastic, and then there are many out there that really don't carry that torch of leadership and being good at those pieces. They had a fantastic HVAC business and then decided to make HVAC franchises. I'm just trying to find a good example, but they that it is a unique skill set, but it seems like it actually fits into your total story pretty well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Seems like a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
So you're having wild success selling your territories. So if people are interested, they should hurry up and check out Exit Factor. So what's next after you sell all these territories? Like what's going to be next?
You know what? I think this is it for me. This is like I really just want to build and grow this, and I want to support our franchisees. I want to support small business, in America and beyond. I want to support my son. I've got, like I mentioned, a young son, a 3-year-old. I want to find balance and make sure I'm there for his whatever games he decides to play, if it's soccer or tennis or whatever it is, right? I want to be there for that portion of my life too. But I think I've done enough jumping around. I feel good here.
That's awesome.
Set for a while.
Well, if
Yeah.
any of our listeners are interested in becoming a franchisee, they should look up Exit Factor and kind of give us your details. But I also think more of our listeners are business owners, and it has
Mhm.
become my own little moment, I should say, in brokerage made me realize just how many people are unprepared and how many people don't know their value. So how would someone find you or one of your franchisees to work with that has a shared set of values and wants to prepare for exit? So how do we get in touch
Yeah.
with you both directions?
Yeah, thank you. So if you go to exitfactor.com, you can see a full map of all of our offices across the US. There's also a quick little calculator on there to figure out, like, what's a range of what the business is worth today and what's the potential it could be for the future. So if you're interested, that's a nice little freebie we have on the website. And then you can connect with me. I'm most active on LinkedIn too. So if anybody wants to personally connect, you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Well, that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to. I'm reading your book, Exit Factor, and I'm really interested in this idea of the conversation. I haven't gotten to that part in the book, so now I'm like, okay, I got to finish this book and start to really understand how to open up these conversations. So,
And where do we buy your book? Can we find it on Amazon and other retailers?
Yeah, find it on Amazon. It's called Getting the Most for Selling Your Business. I kind of did this backwards, so that's kind of like the end of the journey. I actually have a second book coming out in the spring. That's going to be about the beginning part of the journey, meaning like, what do you do when we first start thinking about your exit plan? So working title, but it's coming out in May of next year.
thank you so much, Jessica. I really appreciate you giving us time for this. You're just brilliant and wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
you
so
guys
much.
for having me.